Most people don't fail because they lack motivation. They fail because they aim at the wrong target, negotiate with themselves dishonestly, and try to change their entire life in one emotional moment. If you have ever promised yourself that tomorrow you would become disciplined, focused, productive, healthy, or successful, only to fall back into the same habits days later, this video is for you. What you are about to hear is not motivational hype. It is not positive thinking. It is not about forcing willpower. This is about how real behavioral change actually happens inside the human mind, and why tiny progress, when done correctly, can quietly reshape your entire future. They say things like, "I want to be better with my time," or "I want to stop wasting my life." Those statements sound meaningful, but psychologically, they are useless. The human brain cannot move toward a fog. It needs a target. So the first step is always establishing an aim that is specific enough to negotiate with. Once the aim is clear, the next step is breaking that aim into units small enough that success becomes possible. This is where most self-improvement advice fails. It assumes people can leap from chaos to order instantly, but behavior doesn't work that way. Habits are not switched off like lights. They are rewired gradually through repeated proof that change is survivable. Imagine someone says they waste 3 or 4 hours a day playing video games. The issue is not that games are evil. The issue is that the behavior is interfering with the rest of life. Responsibilities fall apart. Sleep suffers. Confidence erodes. So, instead of moralizing the habit, you negotiate with reality. You ask a simple question. Hypothetically, how much gaming would feel reasonable without damaging everything else? Maybe the person says 1 hour a day. That answer matters because it defines the destination. But here is where psychology becomes critical. When you ask whether they can switch immediately from 4 hours to 1 hour, most honest people will say no. They have tried, they failed. And that honesty is gold, because now you can work with the truth instead of fantasy. A poor strategy would be to say, try harder. Willpower lectures do not rewire habits. What works instead is negotiating downward until success becomes likely. Instead of changing the behavior, you first measure it. No reduction, no discipline, just observation. Track how much time is actually being spent for a week. This step seems insignificant, but it is not. Measurements creates awareness, and awareness changes the brain's relationship with the habit. You are no longer possessed by the behavior. You are observing it. After a week, the data often reveals something uncomfortable. Maybe it is not 3 hours a day. Maybe it is 4. But now the problem has boundaries. It has shape, and that alone gives people relief, because vague guilt is far heavier than precise responsibility. Then comes the negotiation. Not cut your gaming in half. Not be disciplined. Instead, something almost laughably small. Could you reduce your gaming on just 2 days this week by 1 hour? Not forever, just 2 days. This is not manipulation. It is respect for human psychology. You want the person to say yes with sincerity, not optimism, not guilt. Real belief that they can actually do it. When they return and say they succeeded for 2 or 3 days, something powerful has occurred. Objectively, the change seems tiny, but psychologically, it is massive. They have proven to themselves that they can intervene in their own behavior. That belief is far more important than the time saved. Most people miss this moment because they underestimate progress. They say, I still played too much. But if you calculate it honestly, a reduction of even a few hours per week compounds quickly. 12% improvement in 1 week does not feel dramatic, but sustained over months, it transforms lives. More importantly, each successful adjustment strengthens character. Confidence increases. Self-disgust weakens. Hope expands. The person no longer feels trapped inside themselves. They begin to believe, not emotionally, but experientially, that change is possible. This process is not linear. Progress does not move upward in a straight line. It zigzags. Some weeks you improve. Some weeks you slide backward. That does not mean you failed. Behavioral change must be evaluated over months, not days. When people quit, it is often because they interpret temporary regression as permanent defeat. Over time, as habits slowly loosen their grip, empty time appears. And here lies another danger. If you remove a behavior without replacing it, the mind will drag you back. Humans do not eliminate habits, they exchange them. That new time must be filled with something meaningful, even if imperfect. Exercise, learning, work, structure. Purpose does not need to be grand. It only needs to be better than before. Eventually, what begins as time management becomes identity change. The person no longer says, "I'm trying to improve." They begin to say, "I'm someone who can improve." That is a different psychological category entirely. Often, transformation begins with a single moment of awakening, not a gradual plan, not a book, not a podcast. A moment where the future becomes unbearable if nothing changes. For one person, it might be cleaning a prison toilet and realizing that addiction has stripped away dignity. For another, it might be standing in a wealthy home as a child and seeing a different possible life. These moments are not magical. They are perceptual shifts. The mind suddenly recognizes a cost it can no longer ignore, or a possibility it can no longer forget. But awareness alone is not enough. Many people awaken and still fall back asleep. What makes the difference is what happens afterward. Exposure, repetition, environment. The human mind is programmable, whether deliberately or accidentally. What you listen to repeatedly becomes your internal voice. What surrounds you becomes your standard. Most people never choose their mental inputs, then wonder why their thoughts feel foreign and hostile. When someone spends even an hour a day feeding their mind with ideas that strengthen belief, responsibility, and vision, something subtle changes. The internal dialogue shifts. Possibility expands. Discipline feels less like punishment and more like alignment. This is also why environment matters so deeply. Human beings mirror the people around them, not because they are weak, but because the brain is social by design. Attitudes, expectations, and ambition are contagious. If everyone around you is drifting, comfort becomes attractive. If everyone around you is striving, stagnation becomes painful. Choosing distance from destructive environments is not arrogance. It is self-preservation. You cannot build an uncommon life while swimming in common expectations. Growth is often lonely, not because you are superior, but because you are moving in a different direction. Most people want security. Few want responsibility. But responsibility is where meaning lives. The willingness to risk, to fail, to rebuild, and to try again is the price of fulfillment. This is not because some people are special. It is because progress compounds. Tiny improvements repeated over years create outcomes so large they feel miraculous in hindsight. If you improved your habits by just 1% every week, your life in 10 years would be unrecognizable. Not perfect, not easy, but stronger, clearer, more intentional. The tragedy is not that people fail, it is that they aim too high, demand perfection, and abandon the process that actually works. Real change is quiet, it is negotiated, it is measurable, it is humble, and it is powerful beyond imagination. If you are listening to this, it is not because the ideas are new. They are common sense. But common sense is not common practice. The reason this resonates is because something in you already knows you are capable of more. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not behind. You are simply aiming too far ahead of your current strength. Start where you are. Measure honestly. Improve slightly. Repeat patiently. Do that long enough, and one day you will look back and realize that without drama, without hype, without sudden miracles, you quietly built a life you once believed was impossible. And when that happens, you will understand the final truth. Extraordinary lives are not created by extraordinary people. They are created by ordinary people who kept negotiating forward when quitting would have been easier. That is the path.